The conflict that broke out on February 28, 2026, will be remembered as one of the most explosive and important events in Middle Eastern history. What started as a dangerous military mission by the United States and Israel against key targets in Iran quickly grew into a massive clash that pulled in Iran's powerful military group, the Revolutionary Guard Corps, and set off a wave of attacks across the region. At the center of this huge change was the reported killing of Iran's Supreme Leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. This event filled Tehran's top leaders with rage and triggered a string of attacks on U.S. military bases across the Middle East that the world had never seen before. As the sun came up over ancient deserts and busy modern cities, the world suddenly felt on edge, staring at the frightening possibility of a much bigger war. From the very beginning, the news that Iran's supreme leader had been killed in a joint U.S.-Israel operation sent shockwaves through governments and military headquarters, not just in Washington and Jerusalem, but in capitals from Riyadh to Amman, from Doha to Abu Dhabi. Iran's state news later confirmed that Ayatollah Ali Khamenei had indeed been killed in the strikes, announcing days of mourning and warning that the country's response would be strong and show no mercy. In the hours that followed, Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps released a scary statement, saying it had launched what it called its most fierce attack ever against U.S. military bases across the Middle East. It claimed to have struck up to 27 U.S. bases in what Tehran described as punishment for the death of Khamenei and the attacks on Iranian land. This claim instantly spread across international news and social media, causing both fear and disbelief as the world tried to understand the size of what the IRGC leadership was saying. Before we go further into how these dramatic events unfolded and look at the confirmed strikes alongside the wider regional buildup, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe. These are the moments that change global partnerships and redraw the lines between war and peace, and you won't want to miss any updates as this crisis continues to unfold in real time. Iran's response did not come quietly or through careful diplomatic words from Tehran. Missiles and armed drones were launched one after another, flying across borders and heading toward targets identified as American or allied bases, as well as military sites connected to Israel's defense network. According to reports, Iranian forces struck U.S. military sites in Bahrain, Qatar, Kuwait, the United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia, Iraq, Jordan, and other Gulf countries that host American troops, an attack that the IRGC described as punishment for foreign aggression, and a statement that American and Israeli assets in the region had become fair targets. Among the most dramatic of these confirmed strikes was the attack on the United States Navy's Fifth Fleet headquarters in Bahrain. Videos and reports from eyewitnesses in the capital Manama showed anti-aircraft defenses lighting up the sky as explosions echoed and smoke rose near the Naval Command Center. The Fifth Fleet, which is responsible for overseeing U.S. Navy operations across the Persian Gulf, the Red Sea, and beyond, instantly became a symbol of how far the conflict had spread, from Iranian soil to the heart of the U.S. military presence in the region. Shortly after, a series of missile and drone strikes were reported at Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar, one of America's most important air hubs in the Middle East. This large base, which hosts U.S. Air Force units and important aircraft, was put in danger as air defenses worked to stop incoming threats aimed at disrupting Allied operations and sending a message of punishment. In Kuwait, Ali Al Salem Air Base faced its own attack, with radar systems tracking Iranian missiles before defense systems moved to intercept them. Although reports showed that many of the weapons were stopped, the act of targeting such important military sites showed that Iran was willing to strike deep into areas long considered safe. Across the Gulf, Al Dhafra Air Base in the United Arab Emirates was also reported to be under threat as air defense systems lit up the skies to protect the base, which hosts American and Allied aircraft. These coordinated attacks, spanning several countries and involving multiple waves of weapons, marked a rise in the conflict that few people in the world had expected just days earlier. While these bases stand out as the confirmed main targets of Iran's strikes, the bigger picture painted by the attacks showed nearly simultaneous strikes coming from many directions. Reports spread that missiles and drones had been fired at locations in Saudi Arabia, Iraq, and Jordan, raising fears that the conflict could grow beyond a U.S.-Iran standoff and pull more countries in the region into the fight. Alongside military targets, civilian areas were not safe either. Explosions were reported in cities across the region, and defense systems in several Gulf capitals were turned on to stop incoming threats. The emotional effect on local people was immediate. Sirens went off, families rushed to find shelter, and the normal routines of everyday life were broken as the reality of war hit hard. For Iranians back home, The news of their supreme leader's death mixed with the wave of retaliation like a double wave of shock and determination. State media showed Khamenei as a martyr and a symbol of strong resistance against Western and Israeli aggression. Meanwhile, the Revolutionary Guard framed the military strikes as a sacred duty to protect the revolution and punish those who dared to violate Iranian territory. Yet, even in the middle of fierce words and massive explosions, not all claims could be immediately confirmed. The IRGC's claim of attacks on 27 U.S. bases represented the group's own description of how big its offensive was, but independent analysis and reporting confirmed only several key bases as targeted. Still, the psychological impact of that claim alone was enough to send shockwaves through world capitals and financial markets alike. In Washington, alarms went off as intelligence and military officials rushed to understand the changing situation. President Donald Trump and his national security team, already under heavy pressure after their decision to strike Iran, found themselves facing a growing conflict that threatened to affect not just parts of the Middle East, but the entire global order. Emergency briefings, satellite feeds, and rapid situation reports poured into the Situation Room as analysts tracked missile flights, base defenses, and diplomatic messages as if every single minute could change the course of history, across the Atlantic and around the world. The reaction around the world was mixed and tense. Some leaders backed the U.S. action against Iran's government, pointing to long-standing worries about Tehran's missile and nuclear plans, while others warned that the conflict had already grown into something far darker than expected. Condemnations and calls for calm came from capitals in Europe and Asia, even as defense agreements and regional partnerships were tested by the sheer size of the confrontation. Saudi Arabia, which had been cautious about allowing its airspace to be used for attacks, publicly condemned Iran's strikes on Gulf territory, declaring its readiness to support fellow states and warning that continued aggression would have serious consequences. Its crown prince reached out to allied governments to coordinate defenses and show unity in the face of a crisis that had touched multiple capitals. Meanwhile, smaller nations, some hosting U.S. troops and others simply caught in the middle of regional chaos, faced a very difficult decision. Their citizens dealt with the realities of possible travel disruptions, flight cancellations, economic uncertainty, and the ongoing threat of more missiles overhead. Airlines suspended flights over conflict zones, and global markets grew nervous at the possibility of instability in oil-producing regions. Back in Iran, the story was clearly framed as a fight for survival, one in which foreign powers had dared to violate the country's honor and would pay the price through unified resistance. The Revolutionary Guard's statements stressed that no target within range was off-limits, and that any continued military pressure from outside would invite more counterattacks. These declarations spread through the internet, radio waves, and television screens, stirring both national pride and international fear. For the families of American soldiers stationed at bases that had been confirmed as targeted, the tension was very real. While official reports said that many incoming attacks were stopped by layered defense systems, the risk of injury, or worse, remained an everyday reality. Messages between troops and their loved ones were full of worry, made worse by the knowledge that this major conflict had now grown beyond nation-to-nation arguments into actual exchanges of missiles and defense systems. As the situation continued to unfold, Iran's government insisted that its strikes were not random or without purpose. Instead, it described them as carefully planned moves meant to show that any future attack against Iranian soil or leadership would be met with responses that would challenge the idea that any military base in the region was safe. It argued that decades of what it saw as oppression and outside interference had left Tehran with no choice but to defend its independence with all the force it had. The world's fear of the bigger war grew as experts debated the long-term effects. Analysts warned that if diplomacy did not appear quickly, the region faced the risk of a long conflict that could pull in more actors from outside the Middle East, reshaping alliances and affecting global security far beyond the current day. Countries that depend on Middle Eastern energy exports expressed concern about supply disruptions, while defense companies and markets closely watched for signs of lasting instability. Even in the middle of all the chaos, efforts at finding a peaceful solution began to appear. Voices calling for negotiation rather than more fighting gained support in international forums, with calls for ceasefires and diplomatic talks rising among global institutions and concerned nations. But the reality of ongoing missile barrages, aggressive language, and the psychological stress on populations made any quick path to peace seem far away. As night fell over Gulf deserts and cities shaken by warning sirens, the world held its breath. The attacks that followed Khamenei's death had set off a chain reaction unlike anything seen in recent memory, a back and forth of missiles and defense systems that blurred the line between retaliation and escalation, between a focused military fight and the frightening possibility of something far larger. For now, the Middle East remains like a box of matches, burning with uncertainty and deep human emotion, caught between the weight of ancient history and the sharp edge of modern conflict. Each side believes it is right, each father and mother fears for their child, and each nation watches closely, hoping that wisdom might yet calm the fury that now controls the battlefield. In the end, the events that happened after Khamenei's death are not just a series of military moves and strikes. They are a clear reminder of how easily peace can fall apart once the tools of war are set in motion. The claimed attacks on 27 bases, real or still partly unconfirmed, have forever changed the way people think about military conflict in the region. What happens next will be shaped by decisions made in command rooms, conversations whispered in quiet hallways, and the courage of people everywhere who face an uncertain tomorrow. And as this crisis continues to unfold in real time, stay tuned for the latest dramatic updates. Hit that like button and subscribe, because the world's future is being written right now.